the Wharton School, I believe that's the University of Pennsylvania, published a study this week identifying the impact of wage growth versus inflation based on different income brackets. And one thing that they found that I do not think was all that surprising is that inflation hit the lowest earners hardest. And that makes sense. First of all, we know that the big three in anyone's personal finances are housing, transportation, and of course, I'm forgetting the third one. Brain freeze. Housing, transportation, and food, I believe. And so what you've got there is a situation where inflation is actually, like we've talked about, it doesn't hit all segments of the economy equally. Well, housing and energy are inflating much faster than the 7.5% annual rate that is generalized to the entire economy. And there are a lot of areas where food prices are going up faster than 7.5% as well. So obviously people at the lower end of the income levels by earnings spend a higher proportion of what they earn on those three things. And since those three things are inflating at a much faster pace than the general pace of inflation in the economy, it's taken a huge toll. And this study shows that that's the case. In fact, one thing that is interesting that you may not have initially expected is that the people at the bottom end of the income scale, their earnings grew at the fastest pace relative to everyone else in the economy. But because of the impact of inflation, the impact of inflation hit them even harder in spite of the fact that their wages grew the fastest. So, folks at the higher end obviously do better because they've got more disposable income. They've got kind of a cushion, right, where they can absorb some additional expenses without severely denting the lifestyle that they live. But they don't need as much of a percentage increase in their income growth to see some pretty significant real gains. So let me put this out there. Let's say that you've got an earner that makes $100,000 and their income increased by a 5% rate. Well, they are now making $105,000, right? Well, on the other end of the spectrum, if you've got someone who earns $20,000 and they get a 10% increase in their earnings, even though 10% is twice as fast as 5%, you're starting with a much smaller base. So 10% of 20,000 is 2,000. So in real terms, at the low end, you see someone making $2,000 more a year. At the high end, they're making $5,000 more a year. Well, the groceries cost the same for both families, right? So, that's why you can see a situation like in this study where people make more money at the high end, but they feel less of an impact of the inflation than people at the low end of the scale when it comes to their earned income. So, I laid out some things there. I'm interested, Saki, to hear some of your thoughts about all that.
Well, it typically works out that way, and it's always about percentages. So you're right on the money. That's why we encourage people to get a bigger shovel, right? And the shovel is your paycheck. Try to bring in as much income as possible, because the bottom 70% or so of taxpayers are going to be affected more than the top 15 to 25%. Last I read, somewhere around 15-20% of Americans were business owners. That's an outdated number. I don't know what it is now. That was a couple of years ago. I suspect that probably went higher, actually, with the more freelancers in the market. But the reason I bring that up is because what comes to my mind is, when you say people at the bottom are affected more and people at the top are affected less, and you break out the percentages, which that's correct. The more you make, the less overall effect that has on your lifestyle, because it's just a smaller percentage of your pie. But another thing business owners can do is they can pass them cost off, right? So let's say, for example, I mow people's yards for a living, but I'm the employee. Well, if I'm the employee and I'm and I mow your yards, I'm getting paid a certain amount of money. And yeah, that money might go up a fraction. I might get a raise of 5% when inflation comes or something of that nature. So I'm making a little bit more money. But let's change that angle, and let's talk about, hopefully, the person that owns that uh, landscape company, we'll call it. Well, hopefully that person has the ability to actually adjust their prices or adjust their services, or stop offering a service that they don't have such a high profit margin on. So that person who owns that business has a little bit more ability to lessen the impact of inflation to their bottom line. So that's another reason we stress trying to go out to business for yourself and entrepreneurship. You
Yeah.
get to control more of it, is I guess what I'm coming down to.
Well, I think being in control of your financial life is a big, 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 big point. We talk about a lot of things that people can do to take responsibility and ownership for, their destinies. And when times are good, it's unfortunately that's when people, I think, tend to relax, right? Oh, well, I'm doing okay. I don't have to work as hard. I don't have to buckle down and run those side hustles and make that extra income because I'm doing okay. But they don't have a rainy day fund. They don't have a retirement account. They haven't really saved. They just haven't really, gotten into a position where they're uncomfortable. And that's dangerous. That lulls you into behaviors and disciplines that are not healthy for you. Now that times are harder and there are a lot of headwinds that are working against us, I think people are starting to see that, oh, I need to start saving money. I need to start trying to figure out how I'm going to get through all this. But unfortunately, if you don't have those savings and the rainy day fund and that cushion, you're going to have a harder time getting through this. But the fact of the matter is that even in this environment, you still can work hard. You still can get the side hustles going. You can still find opportunities, because there are tremendous opportunities. There's so much demand in the job market right now that you can find a job that is better than the one you have, most likely. You can find a side job that is going to help put more money into your account, to booster that savings fund and that rainy day fund. And the more that you're able to do and the more that you're able to set aside, the less this kind of stuff is going to stress you out and freak you out as we go further, because you're going to have that cushion. You're going to know that, hey, even if something bad happens, I'm going to be able to get through this. That kind of gets me back to the student loan thing. If you don't have very much in savings, and all of a sudden you've got a $300 or a $500 or a $700 a month payment that's about to kick in, that's a pretty scary situation. So, that's not a whole lot different, though, than if your car breaks down and you need a new car. you're going to be taking on a payment like that. You want to make sure you've got the room in your budget to handle something like that when it comes. So, the news is not all bad. It really just depends on what it is that you're aiming for. And, I'll ask you this, Psyche, but how does a person's mindset, how do you think what it is that a person focuses on impacts the choices that they make in their personal financial situations?
Greatly. It's so, if you're thinking about putting food on a table tomorrow and how you're going to feed your family, well, you're going to make a whole different decision today than you would if you're thinking about how does that decision affect me 5 years from now? So we have to weigh that, right? I try to make all my decisions on a long-term basis, but obviously you have to weigh that with your short-term needs because you have to be able to meet those needs in the short term to get to your long-term goals. So you have to balance that. You talk about the great economy we've had the past 3 years. The stock market, first time ever in our lives, has produced returns of over 20% a year annually for the past 3 years. The housing market, obviously, everybody knows. We know about inflation. We know all that. But times have been good. When it comes to a personal consumption standpoint, for me, I kind of tend to follow Warren Buffett's outlook on that. I'm a little bit conservative. And if you kind of follow Warren Buffett, and this is a way I can answer your question, when times are good like this, I tend to not consume as much. I don't make big ticket purchases and I don't spend a lot. I tend to acquire. I try to use this time, and this is something that I've learned from Warren Buffett and millions of other people have, and I advise everybody to read up on this because it's a great way of building personal growth and just being less stressful. But Warren Buffett, if you notice, in Berkshire Hathaway, they usually don't make large acquisitions when times are well. So Warren Buffett is typically held to the path that says, hey, I'm going to build and acquire money right now. When times are good, I'm selling. My businesses are selling products. We're having record revenue come in and income come in. And then when times turn, I've got a stockpile of cash, and then I'm going to buy. And it doesn't have to be a recession to buy, but you don't have bidding wars on things like we do right now. It's just a very difficult time to buy. So long term, you're just better off not buying big ticket items, whether it's consumption or investing, when times are like this, just waiting for it to level out a little bit.
The Purposeful Podcast.